Analysis of the movie The 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment sounds like this. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States of any place subject to their jurisdiction. That is what the amendment states, and therefore we have this movie that simply explores the way that this 13th Amendment, or changed an amendment, basically took slavery and hindered it from being abolished, and basically had it changed instead. So to summarize this movie is an argumentative movie looking at a critique of American society, because when slavery was abolished by Lincoln, he took this 13th Amendment and changed it to this, where there is a small loophole that then the smart slave owners have they have taken control of and used to their own means. That being that, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, and use this to still use racism to get basically free labor. So basically, if we start by looking at this, how they argument, if we have a look at Tolman's argumentative model, there is a main claim that is that slavery hasn't been abolished. Well, not entirely, that is. Because slavery was abolished with Lincoln, but they argue in this documentary that slavery didn't really get abolished, it merely evolved with the new ways to be evil. The men that needed new work power just went into imprisoning black people with the use of racism and intolerance, and in enforcing laws on them, and then use their work powers in the jails. And then if we look at the grounds for this, these are that black people are still getting put to work with no pay in prisons, and the warrant for this and things connecting them is that people being forced to work is still a form of slavery. When you look at the numbers of people being put to work, it is mostly black people. They use a lot of different ways of argumentation in this movie. One of the main ones they use is historic footage, the main one being horrific scenes of racism, and then political speeches from, it could be Nixon or Martin Luther King. These are all very biased, and you get the context from them, in which we have experts speaking out. To be fair, this is a very biased documentary, so all these experts are always speaking of how this ruined America, brought it into a future that was more, less free for the black people and had more, less tolerance. That being, there's no arguing for it. But when they do this, they also show, maybe most importantly, things that keep with you, right? And that's the historic footage of the actual racism. There's a guy being kicked, and they use it a lot, and the actual audio footage of a black kid getting shot by a white man who gets away with it, right? These are things that stick with you, and I'm going to bring that into the argumentative techniques also. And we can start here with pathos. And in pathos, we have these photos and videos I just described, mainly, but also all the stories of these black victims, and these black experts have a big way in dealing up empathy, because we humans are set in a way of, we like justice and we like things being righteous, whereas this is a subject where if you're not a total racist, it's very hard to look at this and say, oh, I don't feel bad for these people. And they definitely play on this very hard, because they show bloody footage, and they show actual audio footage of people getting shot, and they show people getting hanged. They don't really hold back. They're quite brutal in that way. For ethos, they use a lot of experts. Both they have one guy speaking against, a guy from ALEC, but they mostly have people speaking for, and people who have experienced the racism on their own part. And also in the very start, if you look at it that way, the main claim, which is that there are too many also people in prison, is substantiated by Barack Obama saying we have 25% of the prisoners in the world, but we only have 5% of the population in the world. How does that make sense? Which basically leads into all this. And Barack Obama is also a big ethical, or not ethical, he's a big authority on this matter, of course, because he is the first black president, a big milestone for these people on the fight against racism and intolerance in the United States. If you look at logos, that example of Barack Obama is good as well, because they use a lot of numbers to justify and really show that concretely that there's something wrong. Because if you just went into this without anything, of course you would not get any results. But they show that the American numbers of people in prison, of course, have risen immensely since the war on drugs and etc. And generally just the end of the Civil War, where slavery was abolished. And this is used basically also to strengthen their ethos and the argumentation. Intention with this movie is, of course, to maybe bring some perspective on all this intolerance in the United States and maybe more just American society. Because a lot of people here think that we've done great strides with racism, but some people might not think we have. And this is what they try to bring out here, because we still have racism and we still have a form of slavery with big money lords as prison gangs and people who are using the labor in prisons. Not prison gangs, prison owners. Sorry, but they are still they're still using this 13th Amendment loophole to how do you say, further their own capitalistic gains, right? They're still using unpaid labor to get easy production and earn money for themselves. So that's maybe what they want to bring in on this. But mostly, I think the racism and the intolerance and the fact that American society is better than this and that we can come above it. It's the small evil guys who have a lot of money who are able to do this. If you look at the cinematic techniques that are used in this movie, they're mostly used on the things that are actually filmed, right, which is the interviews. The interviews are definitely put up where they're heroes and they're mean ones. We have ALEC, who is the institution that brings basically all the bad guys together so they can draft laws for the U.S. Parliament and House of Senate and etc. Right, where they have been on the side of the prison owners for a long time, because they gave money to this constitution. They were a big part of it, so therefore they wanted more people in the prisons, and therefore they are the bad guys. And they have a representative that is as a contrast to all the other interviewees, right? Interviewees. He's shown from the side and from downwards. He's really shown as a mean guy, and his answers are very deliberately shown as very incompetent, right? Whereas all the other answers are well articulated, and he's stumbling for words, and he's like, our stance is we want less people in prison, and it is very biased editing, and they might be the bad guys, right? And they might have an agenda with this, but it might be a bit unfair. Also, all his arguments also only are rebuttals, so that's very sad for him. Also, they use the songs as transits, which is an amazing way actually, because music has basically evolved since the 1800s with racism and USA. With the soul and blues and rock and roll, they have all shaped music history, and this is all because of racism. That's what you hear about soul in Stax and Memphis, where white owners had to be in front, and then black owners get kind of credit for just being black. They've shown this, and they're also the people involved in the music, and then they write about, of course, the problematic things, so that's a good thing. They use that very much for good transitions. Music is also good to use the pathos. You feel music in another way you don't do words. Now, as a perspective to the American values, this is definitely a critique that America is not following their own values of personal freedom and equality. No one has a freedom when they're in prison, right? And people here are being forced in there unjustly because they are set up in a way that they cannot do anything right. They're breaking the law even though they're just walking down the street and then they get shot, right? So they're taking away their freedom, And it's also equality of opportunity. No, if you're black, you really don't have any opportunity less than basically a bigger chance to get in jail. It's also criticism of capitalism in the way that capitalism has been the dominating, perspective. I know the word, like liberalism and etc. It's basically been the economic form of the USA has been following for a lot of years, and it has its flaws in the fact that here we have a big, small population that are being downtrodden upon by the big guys who have a lot of money. And that's some flaws with capitalism, and also being driven by money, how that can corrupt you. Yeah, basically that's it. I'm going over time. Hope you enjoyed, mate.